Hi there, lovely. I think I'm a little late to the party, and perhaps people wouldn't expect me at 63 to be enjoying Ren's music, but I only discovered him recently in the midst of recovering from a pretty bad bug. One of the first pieces I watched was Hi Ren, and honestly, I cannot stop watching it. I'm completely entranced by his creativity, the mastery of language, and how different the piece is from anything else I've ever seen. But the part that really landed for me was the conversation with himself in the middle of the piece. That familiar back and forth between the voice that says, "You're rubbish, you're kidding yourself," and the voice that says, "No, there's something real here, something worth saying." In the end, hope and remembering to be human is what wins. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it below. It is truly one of the most extraordinary pieces of artistry I've ever come across. As I was watching, I realised part of its real power lay in how familiar it felt. That internal back and forth was exactly how my own inner world sounded when I was drinking. Even as a grey even as a decades long grey area drinker, I've always loved books and I loved writing. I would often produce what I can now safely call some fairly reasonable drivel. But underneath it all, there was always a small flicker saying, "You can do this, don't stop." At the same time, there was that other voice, louder, sharper, telling me I was delusional, egotistical, and incapable of stringing a decent sentence together. And alcohol, as it always does, amplified that negative voice. When I stopped drinking, I genuinely thought, rather grandly, right, now I'll write the book. I'll write the masterpiece. What I hadn't appreciated was how much physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual healing I still needed to do first. I had to reconnect with every part of myself, and it took 8 years before I felt confident enough and just a little bit mad enough to begin writing. I started writing my book, Most Loving Thing, in early 2025. It did come together quite quickly, not because it was easy, but because it had been living in my head for such a long time. Somewhere towards the end of writing it, I realised something really important. I no longer cared whether it was perfect. I wanted it to be good, of course, and obviously I wanted it to be helpful. But more than that, I needed to express something that had been waiting patiently inside me for years. I've seen this again and again in the women I've worked with. There's often a creative part of them that's desperate for expression. I remember asking back when I ran a Facebook group, "What do you create?" and inviting women to share. The responses were very telling. "It's not very good, but," followed by images of beautiful knitting, sewing, quilting, drawing, collage, beautiful, careful, skillful work. What struck me was how much alcohol shaped how they spoke about themselves, because it was often very negative. For the women in the group who were sober, I watched them begin to sit much more comfortably with their creativity. They could finally see the hours of effort, the learning, the discarded attempts, and the pieces that they were quietly proud of. With clarity came appreciation, and often a simple acknowledgement from themselves: "I'm quite pleased with this. This is actually quite good." And that's where I find myself now. I am so proud of the work I've done. I'm happy with what I've put into the world. And if people resonate with it, that is wonderful. And if they don't, that's okay too, because I didn't do it for anyone's approval. I did it because it was essential for me to express myself. I know many of you have that same spark. It often shows up as, I'd love to spend more time, followed by thoughts of something you never quite get around to. Alcohol dulls that spark, and it does a very efficient job at getting you to believe that your creativity is utter rubbish and just a little hobby to keep your hands busy. But that's not the truth. What finishing the book gave me wasn't just creative confidence, it was confidence in myself. And that confidence keeps expanding. I now have 3 more books waiting patiently in my head, and I feel completely at ease with the idea of writing them. That ease for me, as always, comes from my sobriety. As we get older, nurturing that creative part of ourselves really does matter. It gives our evenings purpose, it absorbs us, and it pulls us into something meaningful. It allows us to express the essential parts of ourselves that can't be found anywhere else. And it can be a powerful support tool when you're letting alcohol go. If you're a midlife woman considering an alcohol free life, I really encourage you to look at your creativity, not as something to be minimized, but as something to be reclaimed. Ask yourself, can your creative life become one of the foundational pillars that replaces alcohol for good? How would it feel to lose yourself in doing something that you truly love instead of losing yourself in alcohol? The question, what's the most loving thing I can do for myself right now, is the foundation of my approach to sobriety. Again and again, the answer is never and can never be alcohol. Often it's creativity, honesty, and coming back to who you were always meant to be. If you'd like a little support making a confident start to an alcohol-free life, day 1 of my 10-day reset is linked below. Thank you so much for listening.